how tense and frustrating was that game?
Yeah. I mean, the level of nerves before the game, even for me, I literally felt physically sick to my stomach before the game. But yeah, it's a mixed emotions of really proud, because I've got to say it's one of the first times in a very, very long time. I was really, in the World Cup, we were really good, but I didn't expect us to be so good. And this time I kind of had big hopes, but so many great young players that I don't know, there was just something about this team that was really likable. There's been no problems within the camp like there usually is with England, no kinds of tension between any of the players. So I don't know, I think the crowd fed off that, and it was really, everyone was just so hopeful that this was, fingers crossed, the time. But it didn't happen. It was even worse that my favourite player missed the final penalty. I'm gutted for him, but he is a superb player who is going to bounce back and be even better going forward.
Indeed, it's all going to be good, onwards and upwards.
Exactly.
But yes, and I'm very conscious that we will have lots of people watching who aren't English, so you are, and maybe even some Italian people. Congratulations if you are Italian.
But I'm obviously not everyone is here to hear my kind of post-match commentary about the English.
We'll move on to the whiskey. I am intrigued though, because if you were watching the game with a dram, let us know what dram you were celebrating or commiserating with. That's always interesting.
Definitely.
Well, I mean, I think it was a good tournament. Everyone's a winner. But anyway, onto the whiskey, because we could talk about this for a while, I feel. Oh my gosh, the tasting 2 weeks ago, I loved so much. I thought we had 3 spectacular drams, and we've got 2 more to taste this evening. I'm so excited.
Absolutely. These are 2, I mean, we couldn't get, this is like whiskey from Taiwan and whiskey from Scotland. I mean, this is absolutely mad on a tasting, but it's great to see. Yeah, the one 2 weeks ago was really great. I thought the Daddy Rack for me was a real kind of, I loved that. So the more I thought about that, I loved that Daddy Rack. This is the absolute kind of dram that I could drink. But yeah, really excited for the 2 tonight. And we've got a great special guest as well.
We do. So if you are ordering your drams and wondering what's going on, this is what's going to happen. Let's lay out the plan. So we're going to kick off with Kavalan, Concertmaster. We're going to talk a lot about, well, Taiwanese whiskey, the development of world whiskey, cask maturation, all of this stuff. I'm really, really, really excited for it. And then it's handing over to you, because we have got Iain from Glen Scotia to come and have a chat with you about this wonderful 18-year-old.
Yes, a distillery that I've loved for a very long time as well, and a huge fan of Campbelltown. So really excited to talk to Iain tonight.
Yeah, really, really looking forward to it. And you guys are already like sharing your comments. So if this is your first live tasting, we'll give you a little lowdown as to how it goes. If you're new or you're a member to the new first box, you've got your How to Taste Whiskey guide. We're not going to be crazy geeky about it. This is just here if you're like, I'm struggling to get some flavors or aromas, or I'm not sure what I'm doing. This is your friend, but don't panic. This is about having fun. It's about enjoying. We want to hear what you think of the whiskies though, so don't be shy. Put your tasting notes in the comment spots and ask all the questions.
That's exactly it. And also remember, don't be shy, as Christy said. Please read us your tasting notes. We love to hear from you guys and see what you guys think. Your tasting notes are so awesome to hear, so we love to read them out, and please let us know. And remember, there are no wrong or right answers with that. It's totally subjective. It can depend on your mood, it can depend on what you've eaten just before, it can depend on so many different things. So please, whatever you think, write your tasting notes and also ask questions, because we love to answer those as well. So yeah, Simon already saying the Daddy Rack is so good. Yes, totally agree.
Very, very good. And don't forget, so I can't speak, I'm too excited. Iain from Glen Scotia is the person to put your whiskey questions to. So not just about Glen Scotia, but in general. So he's the distillery manager and master distiller. So any technical questions you got, save them up for him, get them up your sleeve and out of your sleeve and ready to go. Really, really, really excited. It's going to be awesome. Shall we kick things off?
Yeah.
Shall we do this? Should we have dram? Let's have a dram. This is what we're here for. Perfect. So yeah, we'll start with the Kavalan. If anyone's confused about where we are, what we're doing, it's the Kavalan. And this might be the first time that some people have tasted Taiwanese whiskey. I saw a little snippet earlier. Malcolm Tucker, Taiwanese whiskey is going to be a first for me. Yeah, I mean, there are only a couple of whiskey distilleries in Taiwan that I can think of. Obviously, this is one of the 2. And it's really different. It's really fun. So I think it just is worth taking a moment to kind of like appreciate and acknowledge the distilling boom that's happened all around the world. Often when I'm talking about whiskey, we have sort of the old world whiskey producing countries, your Scotland, your Ireland, your America. You might put Japan in that as well. But nowadays, there are countries that you wouldn't even know produce whiskey that are making incredible, incredible spirit. And I absolutely count Taiwan and Kavalan up there as one of these top producers. They're being really experimental, but with a real focus on excellence at the same time. And it's really cool. I don't know, Andy, have you tried much Kavalan before?
To be honest with you, no. I tried a couple at the whiskey show a couple of years back, but that was my first experience with Kavalan. So I'm also super excited to try this with you guys tonight, to be honest with you. But I do love a port cask finish. So if we're talking about finishing, there are many, many port casks. I'm very interested to see a Taiwanese whiskey finished in a port cask. That really ticks the boxes.
Yes, and what I would say is hold on to your tasting glasses, because one thing Kavalan does well is quite intense flavour in a really, really good way. These guys are not messing around when it comes to packing a punch. We'll get on to that in a second. I mean, feel free to taste ahead. These are your drams. Enjoy them. Go for it. But I'll give you a little bit of a backstory. So Kavalan, the name literally just comes from the old name for the region the distillery is. There's nothing fancy about that. It's kind of like a historic name for the region. And this one, so I think it's 2005 the distillery was set up. So when we're talking about like the distilling boom, this is one of the first lot to come along and come onto the scene. And I think they really took inspiration from sort of Japan, which took inspiration from Scotland. So quite a traditional setup, if you want to think about that. But what is fascinating about this, and what I really want to dig into as we're tasting it, is the intensity of flavour from a really quite young age statement. And this is to do with something called the angel share, which you may or may not have heard of. Basically, I'll start now and we can get geekier as we nose and taste. Essentially, the easiest way to explain this is think of a cask as being watertight, we hope, watertight definitely, but not airtight. And that means that you get a bit of evaporation, and that it can be more intense and more extreme in different climates. Like the hotter it is, for example, the more of this evaporation you get, the more the spirit in the barrel will go in and out of the oak staves. It will interact, it will do its thing. In Scotland, you lose about 2% a year due to the angel share. In Taiwan, it can be around 15 to 20%, depending on the climate. So that's how much extra intensity we're talking about. It's a lot. It's full on, which is why you get this amazing depth of flavour.
Absolutely. And it's why they obviously need to be younger. They can't age for the 15 years, or we're about to try an 18-year-old whiskey as well from Scotland, which obviously would not be able to happen with the climate in somewhere like Taiwan. It's the same thing in some places in America, in Australia. We've done Australian whiskey before. It's all the same thing.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to me as well, because it really calls into question, I think, and I'd really love to hear your thoughts on this as well. Age statements, I think for a long time you got really caught up on them, like older is better, like it's incredible to, like, you know, have a 15, 18, 21, 25 and upwards whiskey. But I think what we've realised in recent years with the distilling boom, with people like Kavalan and many, many others creating excellent whiskies at a much younger age, actually it kind of resets your thinking a little bit about what age means. It literally is just a number, and it doesn't mean it's going to be better or worse, which is quite cool.
It definitely does. I remember when Paul from Few was on here a few weeks back, that's no pun intended, but I mean, he was saying that he doesn't like people saying your whiskey matures quicker, for example, than it would in Scotland. So it's not this, you know, it takes less time to mature, because he doesn't think of it in age statements. He thinks of it as when it tastes good. And I thought that was really interesting to see, because sometimes that's not really mentioned when we talk about in hotter climates, whiskey matures quicker. So, you know, that was really interesting to see. And we all loved the Few Rye. So, you know, already from the nose, I mean, you might find as well with a younger whiskey like this, much more kind of intensity straight away coming from its kind of bold brashness. But like we said, there's a time and place for that. I mean, I love a balanced whiskey, super balanced whiskey, but I also love a super young whiskey that's really can be rough around the edges sometimes. It's got a lot of character, personality. So yeah, I don't think we've discussed it before. I mean, age is definitely not, you know, it doesn't mean it's better because it's older. I think that's a common misconception in the industry. And
I sometimes think younger whiskies, it's more like they're a bit of an extrovert or something like that. They're we'd say more pronounced. And when talking about, I'm getting into geeky tasting lingo now. When you're nosing a spirit and trying to work out, is it intense? Is it pronounced? I like to think like, how loudly is it shouting at you? And this one I would say is like, it's throwing its voice. It's not like singing, shrieking from a stage, but you don't have to stick your nose very far in that glass to get a whole lot of flavour coming off it.
I have to say, I'm today, because I'm away at the moment, they really selfishly, the cottage has not got Glencairn glasses, and I forgot mine. So can you believe that should be an absolute standard in all B&Bs is a Glencairn glass if you are going to drink whiskey. No, but it's not a problem. Obviously, drink whiskey in whatever glass you want to drink it in. But it feels really odd for me not nosing from a Glencairn.
Yeah, amazing. And just before we get stuck into those, and I will run through some of your tasting notes because there's some amazing comments coming in. Definitely keep them coming. Just to say as well, that in terms of casks, this one is fascinating. It's matured for the most part in ex-bourbon casks, which is fairly standard. Like we see bourbon casks used everywhere in the world. Bourbon producers can only use their casks once, so ship them off to other people and they'll make use of them. Happy days. It's a system. It works. But they have finished this in not one, not two, but 3 different ports.
Wow.
And quite frankly, this makes me want to go to a port tasting ASAP because I'm so intrigued and I wish I knew more about port to dissect them a little bit. So if this is you and you're a port expert, let me know. So we've got Ruby Port, Tawny Port, and Vintage Port. All obviously from Porto in Portugal. Lots of port going on there.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of port going on in the nose. I'm just getting loads of dark fruit, which I do tend to get forecast, like really deep plums as well.
Indeed, indeed. So what are you guys making of it? Jeff, it's raisins and Christmas pudding for me from the nose on this. Yes, it is. A question from Ian Jambo Rain. Hello, Ian. Hope you are well. Is it natural colour? I don't know is the short answer to this. Producers don't have to disclose whether or not they've added their caramel colour. I'm just going to see if I can see on the bottle. I've got a picture of the bottle right here. I can't see a disclosure on it. So we don't know. We don't know. And that's true of like the vast majority of whiskies in the market. But if they have added it, I mean, it's for like consistency of colour. Like I think so often we get caught up on it. And it is really nice, I think, from an interest perspective to see a whiskey at natural colour because it's like, oh, that's what it came out the cask like. That's what it looks like. But in terms of the flavour and tasting experience, unless they've tipped like a, half a pot of it in there, you're not going to notice. It's fine.
I remember you're allowed, as well in Scotland, it is legal to do that and add colour. So it's not really, it's not this, shouldn't be so frowned upon, especially if you're looking for consistency at a cheaper price point and you've got a huge, you're not releasing in small batches, then, adding colour is absolutely to get this level of consistency between all the bottles.
Definitely. Another question from Roger. You said relatively young. Do you know how old this is? Again, sadly not. However, there's a caveat to this. The rules we have here in Europe and the UK, obviously not part of the EU anymore, to be called a whiskey, it has to be a minimum of 3 years. So we know it is at least 3 years. What that means in practice, most likely, is there might be some 3-4-year-old, but there'll probably also be some 5, 6, 7-year-old all blended in there to get it like just right. It's like, imagine trying to like color match a painting or something. You're trying to get the exact hue, or you go to, I don't know, B&Q, other shops are available, to get your color match for your living room. You have a bit of that, a bit of that, a bit of that, and blend it to get the exact thing that you want. And a lot of, well, pretty much every single malt producer will do that. They'll mix, they've got a spectrum of barrels. It's just the youngest one that carries the label. So that's cool.
Not on commission from B&Q, by the way, everybody. There are other shops.
I am not. I mean, I'm not really at home in a DIY shop anyway. They are quite
Same.
What else have we got? Malcolm says, getting the raisins and nutty background that I find in the bottle of Tawny Port. Exactly. That's that Finnish influence coming through. It's awesome.
I think what's really interesting, like I said, I don't know so much about the differences between different types of port. That would be the interesting thing for me to find out with this dram, is to try more port and understand what the Tawny adds and what the Ruby adds in the vintage one in difference, because I just think of port a lot of the time as port. But then when I think of sherry, I understand much more the kind of the differences between Oloroso, Fino, Sherry Manzanilla, blah, blah, blah. But haven't got that deep with port. But I mean, this is really, this nose is really magnificent, I have to say. It's everything you'd want from a port cask.
See, now I'm thinking we need a pour and sip trip to some port houses when the world opens up again. We'll all get on a flight over to Porto, go and see some producers, really geek out about it. Anyway, that's a story for another time. I love this. I think it's from Brizzy. Sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. Reminds me of my mom making the Christmas cake when I was a child. I love how aromas can do this. They just evoke these incredible memories, and I adore it. David is red grapes, vanilla and nuts. Jen saying after the raisins, the cinnamon and plum. I totally agree. Crumble and polished wood from Eddie. Mikolai says it's a much lighter taste than the nose would indicate. I haven't got stuck in yet, but I'm intrigued by this. Nigel, a fruity nose with a slight air of a Spanish Rioja wine. I like it. Roger really likes it, but wishes it was a bit stronger. I mean, this is it 40%? Yes. So we are, literally the lightest end of things here. Malcolm's getting some damp shoe leather after the port, which is really interesting. Oh, I love it from Pat. I swear I can hear Santa's sledge. Yes, please. Slightly unseasonal, but we'll go for it.
Yes.
Oh, Andy, have you started your Christmas shopping yet?
No, I have not. I can't think about Christmas now. We're about to have a heat wave.
I know, but it is. It's like Christmas in a glass.
But no, this is absolutely, this is a Christmas dram, I have to say.
Yes, I love this. There are so many great comments here. Green tea is green. I know I'm missing some of you out, so sorry for that. Interesting, if you hold the liquid on your tongue for a while, there's a real perfumed quality that comes out. I'm going to try that in just a second. I like that. I think this is the thing, like, when we think about tasting whiskey, it's sometimes really interesting to hold it in your mouth for a bit to get to know the texture as much as the aromas and flavors.
I think I've said this before, that we don't speak so much about the texture. Everyone goes straight for the aromas and what they taste on the palate, but we never talk about the texture of the whiskey and the mouthfeel, which is also super, super important. I'm just going to quickly grab my charger because I can see my...
Go for it. I will waffle on while Andy gets his charger. Oh my gosh. Star of the evening for Iain Jambo Rain. Port and Sip Club. Yes, please. David's getting brown sugar, pepper and port. James is saying there's pear drops in there as well. Oh my gosh. Joe has experimented with the water, which is always recommended, but just go drop by drop at the time. They've gone for droplets, 3 drops of water, I think, bring out the fruit on the palate, which is excellent. Eddie's talking about sitting in front of the fire and falling asleep after lunch on Christmas Day. My goodness, we're in full December mode now. And Nigel's pinning out an interesting book about a slightly tannin taste. Unsure at the minute, which is fine. Like, you're not every whiskey to everyone, but yeah, I'm gonna get stuck in. Cheers, Andy. First dram of the day. I think that's really lovely. Yeah,
it's definitely. I can't remember who it was who said it, but it is much lighter on the palate. Like, the mouthfeel is not quite. I was expecting it to be much, much denser on the mouthfeel. It's really bold nose, like really deep fruits, like plums, kind of deep red fruit. And lots of grape as well on the palate as well, which I always tend to find with port casks. So my mind automatically goes to grape and plum as soon as I hear port. Have you mentioned Iain Jambo Rain's comment about Port and Sip Club? Did you?
I have. I gave him a gold star for it. I love it.
Well done.
Keep your puns coming. We love a pun.
Sugar-coated almonds on the finish kind of vibe for me, which is really nice.
Kind of like a dusty dark chocolate, I feel, as well.
Absolutely. There's definitely dark chocolate in there. That kind of cacao powder as well.
Yeah, it's like that tannin element, like just making it sort of like go a bit like almost, peppery, powdery at the finish.
Yeah, I'm going to have another dram of that because let's get my head around that way. It's really, really, really nice. It's just so much fresh fruit in there for me.
Yeah. And we had a question about the name of this. Now, I don't know, but I have seen so many Kavalan releases that have like orchestral based names. I feel like there's a music theme going on. And obviously some distilleries will like tap into themes. I think you see patterns in a lot of releases. Some in Scotland might do like local language names and stuff like this. So yeah, I don't think there's too much to read into it, except it seems to play on the theme. Yeah.
Caged Pap saying it's a picnic bar dipped in whiskey. I don't remember picnic bars all that well, to be honest with you. So there's great tasting though. Alistair Taff saying the names go up in importance in an orchestra, soloist being at the top. So that is possibly true.
I like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Mikolai hinted tobacco smoke, absolutely. Earl Sutton getting that hint of smoke and maybe molasses, definitely molasses. Lots of molasses, kind of dates and brown sugar. Gareth Peters definitely getting the almonds, as I was saying I was getting as well. Iain Jambo Rain, that's very pleasant. Agree it could benefit from a bit more ABV, but really smooth, really getting the fruitiness from the port, but agree not as strong as the nose suggests.
It's really fascinating, really, really fascinating. I am, not going to lie, getting a whisper of something smoky in there too, which wasn't expecting. And I can see Mikolai has picked out a hint of tobacco smoke as well. And Earl Sutton. I'm wondering if I'm getting, my palate is confusing a little bit with maybe like a slightly sulphury vibe, like a struck match situation, possibly more than smoke. But there is something in there that's really adding sort of that little extra depth, almost like we're talking about fragrance earlier, like an oody kind of base note to it.
I found from port cask finishes before, I've got this kind of like musty kind of cheese note that kind of lingers as well, but I'm not getting that at all from the savoury part of this at all. And I mean, it's like a hint of smoke. I'm really not getting it. It's, I mean, hot, like a whisper, like the most delicate whisper. To me, I'm just getting this bold, brash red fruit and kind of brown sugar, molasses, dates, plums, plum crumble, all of that kind of stuff. Those beautiful kind of port influenced characters.
I do have a bone to pick with you though, Andy. You mentioned the C word, you mentioned cheese. Now all I'm thinking about is what cheeses would pair with this whiskey, which is a tangent we go down every single tasting.
Well, port and cheese as well is just, that is...
It's a classic.
Absolute match made in heaven. That is Christmas for me.
Yes. I want to know if anyone's got a cheese board. Somebody actually made a really beautiful cheese board to go with the tasting last week. So if that was you, raise your hand, please. And I want to see evidence of another cheese board, because I think that's genius.
Absolutely. That was the best pour and sip kind of I can't even, whatever the word is. It was just amazing. I've got to say, for me, the tasting that I'm getting now in my head is Dr. Pepper. I'm getting loads and loads of Dr. Pepper. It's I think it's that kind of marzipan kind of thing as well that I'm getting with it.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and I feel like I'm just so excited. I mean, Kavalan now is definitely one of like the older sort of grand names of the New World distilling, because it's been around for 15, 16 years. But I am so thrilled when we see producers coming up in these markets doing different things, playing with like a lot of freedom and expression to do whatever they want. And I think yeah, this is a really solid dram. It's really interesting. There's loads going on in it. Yeah, it's quite decadent, I feel.
It's definitely decadent. It's an absolute, for me, it's a dessert dram all over. It's an absolute dessert dram. This one, for sure.
Interesting question from Paul here. Did they use the STR process with the Concertmaster like others in their range? So I'm probably going to get this wrong. Shaved, toasted, recharred casks is what we're talking about here. So casks, when they're brand new, they'll typically be like toasted or charred on the inside, depending on what you want to do with them and the effect that the sort of blender wants to get at the end of it. It's really important to think that this char, it's a bit like a mini filter on the inside of the barrel. It doesn't add anything, and it certainly doesn't add smoke. It's like a mini filter. So what it is when you have a shaved, toasted and recharred cask, you're kind of like shaving off the inside, almost starting again with some fresh wood, toasting it again and then recharring it. So it's like almost like pressing reset a little bit. I mean, Iain can correct me if I'm wrong. He will know much more about this than me. This is like how I can explain it. And again, I don't know. I feel like a lot of new distilleries use this process. It's the late great Jim Swan that kind of like pioneered it with a lot of people, and it really does kind of almost press the accelerator, I think, in terms of like maturation. So especially if you're a young distillery, you need to get stuff out quickly. This charring, shaving, toasting, recharring process can again help with that sort of slightly quicker maturation. You're getting a bit more out of your cask. You're making it work that little bit harder to help you get that flavour. I would not be surprised if that process has been used with this, but I can't say for sure.
Yeah.
Is the long answer to that very simple question.
Yeah.
Which is a very good point. Fabulous. Well, this was a joy. I feel like this is a really interesting start. We've got, oh my gosh, Rob Bester would kill for some Stilton with this.
Yeah, big time. I've kicked it off there with the cheese word, the C word.
Yeah, he did it. Green tea is green, Shropshire blue. I think, yeah, this is a bit of a blue cheeser. I think the sort of the tang will cut through the what am I talking about? The fruit, spices.
Yeah. I think.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Here we go. Pete, vote for white Stilton and apricots in this. Right. I think we're gonna have to wrap this up, Andy. Otherwise, we're going to be reading off cheeses for hours.
Cheese and sip again.
Sip. Shall we see if Iain is here to join us? And we can get stuck into our next fabulous dram of the evening. So let me just zip Iain in. Hi there, Iain. How are you doing?
Hi, guys. Hello. Hello, everyone. How are we doing? How's things?
I mean, could not be better, quite frankly. Tasting wonderful whiskey on a Thursday evening with a wonderful group of people. So happy days.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I hear the C word, the cheese. The cheese is getting a good... It's getting a good...
now. So Sarah's just busted out the Manchego, apparently. It's all happening now.
I've got cheese envy. Cheese envy. In fact, I'm going to nip off, potentially to the fridge. Like, couldn't say, can't comment, can't deny. And I will leave you guys to crack on with the Glen Scotia, and I will be back with a small snack very shortly. See you in a bit.
Thank you, Christy.
Thank you, Christy. Bye. How's it going, Iain?
Good, sir. Yes, good, Andy. Yes, it's been good. It's been busy. Campbelltown's probably a little bit busier than normal, it's fair to say. And yeah, we're working away. Your distillery's been working away. We've been working away really, minus the tours and tasting since last July. So yeah.
Open yet? Are you back open to the public yet?
We are, but it's only really in a sales side of things, Andy. So we're getting there. We're getting there. It's slowly but surely. We're changing staff and such like in the shop, so there's been a wee bit of change there. So yeah, but it's been good. It's been good. It's been obviously it's been a tough year for many, but it's been an interesting year from a whiskey point of view. So yeah, it's
got
been
creative with how to kind of do tastings and stuff, and here we are in this kind of environment. Iain, for those who don't know, before we start, if anyone has any questions for Iain, please do ask them. I'll try and ask all your questions. Yep. We're now going to drink. We're going to talk about Glen Scotia, and we're currently got the Glen Scotia 18. So do what I've done. It's an 18-year-old whiskey. Pour this beforehand, and kind of whilst me and Iain talk, you let your whiskey kind of air a tiny bit, and then give it a taste. So Iain, talk to us a bit about yourself and how you got into whiskey, because it wasn't kind of straightforward whiskey kind of journey.
No, it certainly wasn't. It was, I think the best way to describe it was a baptism by fire. I was from more an engineering background, Andy. So I'm from Campbelltown. I was born in Campbelltown. Spent just about all my life in Campbelltown. And as I say, I worked 15 years ago. I worked with the local water industry. So it was engineering background there. I always had a passion for whiskey, the history, everything about Campbelltown really, really interested me. The job came up quite a while back now, and yeah, they must have taken pity on me or something.
So you just applied for the job. I just thought, there it is.
There you go. It's like something out of the 60s, isn't it? When you used to stand up and get a job, and it was pretty much like that. But when I think back now, I was so naive. What was ahead of me. Absolutely, it really wasn't for the faint-hearted. But the industry's developed so much. But it was a case of probably no one else wanted it at that time. And that's the way whiskey was. Glen Scotia.
It wouldn't be like that nowadays, Iain. It would not be like that nowadays.
No. If I did the same thing nowadays, no. Go away.
So talk to us a bit about what you do at the distillery and your kind of day-to-day life. What happens at the distillery for you on a day-to-day basis?
Oh, Andy, I mean, I've got to say, my job really suits my personality, I think, because I'm at everything, and it's wide, it's varied, and it's I'm really blessed in the fact that obviously the Loch Lomond group leave me alone. I do my own thing. The team we've got at Glen Scotia, everything. I just get on with what I've got to do, and it's fantastic. It really is. Running a distillery. Well, the early days was obviously quite challenging. Obviously getting the process where it had to be. I worked quite closely with John Peterson at Loch Lomond in my early years, and John was pretty much a scientist. He was really into the fermentations and the finer points of making whiskey, which was fascinating. It really was, to get the chance to spend some time with someone like John. I moved on, and the distillery nowadays, basically, as I say, it's going well. Production's well. When I started, there was 3 of us. Now there's a total of 9, soon to be 10 of us at the distillery. Still quite small, 500,000 litres. Early days, it was 80,000 litres. And the original, the original bottlings that we had at Glen Scotia, really old 12-year-olds. Some of the audience might have seen these, but they're quite rare now. The old 12-year-olds, I can always remember asking this question, and I've mentioned this before a few times to people, but I always asked the question, about the sales and marketing, and I always said to John, I says, so tell me, John, sales and marketing side or the sales side, particularly, how much do we sell at Glen Scotia? And he says, look, Ian, at the moment we sell roughly about one cask, and we bottle one cask of Glen Scotia a year, for the 12-year-old. The rest are independent bottlers. So that's what it was, and it was, it was really challenging. It really was, and it was, I guess you've got a job like that, you've got to make it a labour of love, and that's what it became for me. So wonderful.
Great story. Cage Paps saying, can't drink whiskey from Campbelltown and not think of the song Campbelltown Lock. Oh, Campbelltown Lock, I wish you were whiskey. I'm not aware of this song. Sorry. But it's the interesting question I've got for you is, so with Glen Scotia's, the Campbelltown product, got some very, very noisy neighbours for you guys, but Campbelltown is really interesting to me. I love the kind of Campbelltown character, the kind of maritime salinity. But it was once the whiskey capital of the world. What happens that there's now only 3 distilleries there?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The story of Campbelltown is fantastic, and it's something that I've known. Well, you pretty much grew up with it, don't you, really? Whether you want to, you don't want to know it, it's part of your heritage, I guess. I mean, Campbelltown nowadays, everyone probably who come here, they normally travel by road, so you consider it quite remote. But when you consider, the main mode of transport in the 19th century was obviously going to be by sea, by boat, then it was incredibly well connected. And that helped establish a certain amount of wealth, early wealth, through the fisheries, through trade, through being well connected with Glasgow and further afield. So that really gave it the foundation. They gave the early industrialists, if you like, that cash base to obviously develop into whiskey. Whiskey was coming online just about the same time as Campbelltown was really coming to its early peak, if you like. Start of the 1830s there. Whiskey was starting to develop. The excise acts, the taxes, everything was obviously getting looked at, and it made it more favourable to run legal distills rather as illegal distills. And it's worth remembering, obviously, when we talk about the distilleries in Campbelltown, everyone talks about how many distilleries were, but when you consider those distilleries well before that, which were both legal and illegal. But yeah, I mean, it developed into 27 plus distilleries at any one point. Probably about the 1880s, you'd about 22, I think, was the most running at any one time. So it was an incredible place, it really was. It was, and don't get me wrong, it wouldn't be a picture of tranquility and beauty, it would be industrial, it would be harsh, it would be a rough old place in its early days. And that really developed, right in until the 1920s, obviously after the Great War, and a lot of the original owners passed on. There was a lot of consolidation in the industry at that time due to, obviously, world events and finances, etc. Speyside was coming online. The railway obviously helped with that. And really, Campbelltown, really, it was like everything does. It kind of fell out of favour. There's obviously Speyside whiskies were more accessible for that blended malts were coming online. So yeah, it had its day, and it kind of it fell by the wayside a little bit. But it's good. It's good. It's back. It's back, and it's buoyant as ever.
It's definitely back. And I think as well, I really love the Campbelltown character. Can you talk to us a bit about that kind of character as well? The kinds of, there's classic notes you can expect from a Campbelltown whiskey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I look at and as I say, there is differences. Obviously, Campbelltown, the region, when you consider the region of Campbelltown, total production's not even 1 million litres. So it's one of those areas which is going to be much in demand, whether it's a Springbank, whether it's a Kilcairn, whether it's a Glen Scotia. You're going to get, if you consider a Glen Scotia, and this one I've got in my glass, the 18-year-olds, when you consider that, there's certainly a medium robustness there. You're going to get that certain amount of robustness. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is it's got body, it's got structure. Whether it's oils or whether it's just the mouthfeel, there are a lot of different components there that'll give it that medium robustness. It's certainly going to have salinity, And that salinity will both come from the process, you know, following the malted barley through the process, and absolutely from the maturation, coastal maritime influence. There's going to be the oiliness, the subtle oils there. You see the oils from the glass there. But importantly, and this is really important, and this is something that probably took up about 10 years of my life, was the flavour profile. You know, it was getting that flavour profile right. It was developing that wonderful flavour profile. And that is obviously initially, and what you were talking about earlier about aged whiskies. Any whiskey, whatever age it is, whether it's 3 years old or whether it's 50 years old, is really only going to be as good as it's the total of its sum parts, how it was put together.
Absolutely. So, age is something that can maybe give you a hint about a kind of a, you know, it can let you know, what to expect from the kind of the character of the whiskey. You'd expect an older whiskey to be much more balanced than a younger whiskey, but it doesn't absolutely tell you how much more you're going to enjoy a whiskey, or what flavour profiles you're going to get from that certain whiskey. I mean, 4-year-olds, 18-year-olds we're trying tonight, so super different, but it's just a number at the end of the day. But I mean, Glen Scotia do a lot of, I mean, you work mostly with age statements, right? I think you've got the 15, which I've got to be honest with you is just one of my favourites from any core range. And the 18 and the 25, is it as well?
Yep, absolutely. World Whisky of the Year, which was remarkable, for, as I say, when you consider where Glen Scotia came from, remarkable achievement for the team at the distillery. So, yeah, it's, and I think Glen Scotia is no different from any other distillery, Andy. I think you're always fighting your stock profile. What stock you've got will dictate what you can bottle ultimately. So you got to be clever with it. Absolutely, everyone loves to see an age statement, but again, realistically, it means nothing. It's just how good the quality of that whiskey is in the bottle really is the benchmark, if you like. So yeah, we've got the 15, 18, 25-year-old. 15 is probably closer to the distillery style than any of the drams. Wonderful. That Campbelltown, Glen Scotia style there comes through. And right down to double cask, and that's something that the team's made, that the present team at the distillery, whiskey being potentially a long-term project that, we're incredibly proud of, that the double cask and how it's, how it's came good for us. So, wonderful.
I mean, has it been a difficult journey for Glen Scotia as well? Like in terms of it wasn't the most recognised brand, in terms of, if we talk about Campbelltown, how has it been, kind of rebranding the product? Because I remember, I've seen bottlings of, in my opinion, I love those bottlings, the old kind of UV light, kind of fluorescent, weird kind of blue kind of bottle, which looked like a bit like a bottle of WKD, I hate to say, but the rebranding has been really successful, right? And I love the new bottles of the Glen Scotia. I think they're really old school, and they represent I don't know, traditional whiskey practice. There's something about it. You look at the bottle and you go, I trust that this is going to be a really authentic whiskey.
Yeah, it has, Andy. I mean, I distinctly remember, the early days. I say when there was 3 of us there, there was very, very little emphasis on Glen Scotia by the owners at that time. But due where, credit where, what they'd done at that period, the distillery was running and it was operating, and the potential was there to obviously fine tune it and get it to the right stage where obviously that new make spirit that we're producing was of a high standard, and that was really fundamental. And in hindsight, it was probably the right time to do it because there was no exterior pressures with marketing, with sales and whatever. So it took a long time, and it always does with any distillery, but it really worked well for us. But yeah, when you consider the early days, it was there was just no one really wanted to, it was really just pity was the only aspect that was coming Glen Scotia's way.
Took you on for the job out of pity. The interest from Glen Scotia was out of pity. Glen Scotia's become what it is today, ladies and gentlemen, out of pity. But I'm pleased. I've got to be honest, I'm pleased because I absolutely love Glen Scotia. I'm just going to read out a couple of comments. Jeff, Campbelltown is lovely. I was based, I'm going to try and pronounce this, Ian, you might be better than me, will be, being from Campbelltown. Machrihanish.
Machrihanish, yep.
and had a few headaches in Campbelltown. Absolutely.
Well done. Well done. Yeah.
W2C calendar. This probably is a better question for after. I'm going to ask you this question, then I promise we'll try the 18. What's your favourite Glen Scotia?
Oh, mine. Do you know, it kind of varies, you know, and I've got quite a kind of eclectic mix. You know, I love trying whiskies, and I'll try a lot of different whiskies, whether it's Glen Scotia or every other distillery I can get my hands on. You know, that's really me. I don't really stick with one in particular. You know, I try all different ones. I'm trying single casks. I'm trying. Probably the job I do lends itself to that quite well, in fairness. But yeah, it's not even mood. You know, a lot of people say it's the mood I'm in. It's not really. It's just, you know, it's just whatever, you know, is probably on my mind or on my agenda at that time. So yeah.
I've just looked down and seen the absolutely outrageous amount of comments that I've got to catch up on here. We'll give this a nose as well. The 18-year-old. Talk us actually also a bit about this, the 18-year-old, and the kind of. So this is had a 12-month finish in sherry casks.
Yes, absolutely, Andy. So basically, what we've got here, we've got a combination of first fill and refill American oak, and by refill American oak, I mean reconstituted refill barrels, which are made into a hoggy, so a hogshead. So Scottish hoggies are called, really. You know, it was quite a common, prevalent cask, you know, 30, 40 years ago, but still use them, still a lot of them about. So first fill, refill American oak, and for the sake of argument, if you say 50% each, but in fairness, in every vatting or every run of that 18-year-old, it's going to be slightly different. So you've obviously got to manipulate it slightly just to make sure that you get the correct balance, the correct recipe, etc. So we'll vat it, and then we'll basically give it a 12 months finish in Oloroso sherry.
Is 12 months quite a long time to finish like that? Because I mean, usually they're shorter than that.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and it's one of those things. Probably initially it would be, let's try it, and obviously go through the process. And obviously it's experimental at that point. But once you get that and you know it works, then you're okay. You know, so, yeah, you're right. When you consider the festival edition this year, Andy, you know, the red wine cask.
Is that the red wine cask, which was?
Yeah,
I've got a bottle at home. It's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful draft. And it was the year before. Is it the rum cask, which was also?
It was Tawny the year before, and then it was the rum before that, and then it was the Ruby Port was the first one. So yeah.
So you were definitely the man to help us talk about the port casks more that we're featuring in Kavalan. Right, I'm going to read out some of your tasting notes before we go, because there are just so many, and I'm sorry if I miss your comments. So someone wrote a good one here. So anyway, Eddie Marshall, definitely buttered crumpets and red apples with a slight dustiness. Love this. David Stanton, honey, caramel, almonds, toffee. Steve Howdy Doody, I hope that is your surname. Elizabeth Smoke in this one. Kevin O, buttered dried apricot and a touch of salt. Malcolm Tucker, when my nose first hits the glass, it's salty sea spray, but as I get in, there's buttery notes and green apples. And Brizzy C starts salty and buttery, but after a few minutes goes much sweeter, clear honey. Guy CP, welcome back. Guy, malt fruity orange tutti frutti. Green tea is green, buttery with a hint of bananas. Mike Pizarro, yup, I've migrated to marmalade on toast by the beach as the sun rises. Wow. That is really evocative. That is a great note. Yes, so lots and lots of people. Eddie Marshall, my favourite Glen Scotia Victoriana, is fabulous and very unlike any other whiskey they do. It's slightly dirty, but in a very good way. Colin Bathgate is looking forward to comparing this one to the 15. So let's talk about the nose on this one. What for you? What do you get with this one?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, straight away, you know, and you know the everyone's hit on it straight away. Yeah, every one of these comments has pretty much get a part of the tasting notes that I've done for this. So straight away, the salinity comes through to me straight away. You know, it's really Campbelltown. You get that certain amount of that robustness is there. You know, you get it. It's Campbelltown. That's
the real character. That's what I love about Campbelltown, by the way. You just smell it instantly. It's there. And I've never been, but I'd love to, because I just assumed that the air would smell like this by the coast.
It's all like this. Whiskey. It rains whiskey here, you know. Exactly. But yeah, it is. You know, it's really that Campbelltown funk. It's that Campbelltown there's a dirtiness there, you know. It really is. It's wonderful, you know, in a lovely way. But yet there is that toffee sweetness. I heard someone mentioning the toffee sweetness there on the nose.
Butterscotch as well for me as well. Toffee and butterscotch, like Werther's original.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I get in this one quite a bit is I really get quite a bit of that refill bourbon, you know, a refill bourbon cask, not a first fill, but a refill bourbon cask, which, you know, really, I don't know whether the sherry's just, you know, bringing that to the fore more, but yeah, wonderful. It really sits really well. 46%, guys.
Yeah.
Non-chilled filter, natural colour. So yeah, beautiful. Let's give it a try. Slancher.
Yeah. Slancher, cheers.
Mm. Yeah.
It's really aromatic and fresh, and little hints of spice at the ends there. A little bit of nutmeg there that's on the finish for me. But I mean, for me, there's like a real toffiness to it, which is wonderful. And like a really wonderful, warming, coating mouthfeel that's coming from the kind of the non-chill filters. You know, the haze you're getting from this Glen Scotia. I mean, it's already started to go slightly hazy in my glass, and I haven't even added water to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, something like that is, you know, it's. I always advocate trying it without water if you can. You know, obviously cask strength, whatever, it's difficult, but always try it without water. See how it sits, see how it works, and then go back to it. But yeah, you know, it really is. You really get a lot of there's quite a lot of vanilla coming through there. It really develops into slightly more, you know, the sherry aspect there, but yeah, you still get that background DNA. You get a lot of the original casks there, which are there. Slightly more of the refill, more of the bourbon coming through there, and the finish. I think the finish, you know, it's slight dryness there. It's elongated with oils. Oils kind of keep it going slightly there towards the back of the palate, and that spiciness.
Yeah, there is a real spiciness that's lingering on there, which is almost like a hint of pickled ginger as well, which is really, really lovely. I'm going to try this again because actually, I mean, the sherry cask the finish has not overwhelmed this at all, even at 12 months, as we were talking about. It's wonderfully balanced within the vanillas and the kind of, you know, that little spice from the bourbon casks. And it's kind of like a slight undercurrent of currants and raisins and stuff like that. So the kind of sherry cask influence you usually get, which is really, really lovely.
Yeah, and I think that is really important. It's probably a really, really good point you hit on there, Andy. Is I think you know, whatever whiskey you're putting together or whatever whiskey you're tasting, I think you know, it's really got to be incredibly well balanced, and I think that is a must for any whiskey. It's a finished whiskey, whether it's an original cask, then I think it's, you know, you've really got to get the story behind it, where it comes from. What type of whiskey it is, what's it trying to tell me here? You know, everything should really come together in a wonderful sequence story, if you like. So I
mean, this really does. I think it's superbly balanced, and all the parts, the recipe is just really, really well balanced, and it's just that lovely salinity, the salt that kind of hits you as well straight away, that Campbelltown salinity. It's just got all those kind of profiles, the savory, the sweet, saltiness, wonderful stuff. There's a question here, which, so Guy CP is asking, can you ask if they use much peat, how much, and are there other drams in their range that may have a little more smoke in the profile? So I'd argue that this is possibly one of the lesser peated ones that you have, if at all.
Yeah, and a really good question, you know, because potentially some of the whiskies you'll drink from Glen Scotia might have a little bit of peat in there, but I would argue sometimes you'll never pick it up. You know, it's part of the what I mentioned, but obviously the cask makeup of the 18-year-old. There's, you know, you'll use what you've got, you know, to the best of your ability. So sometimes you might use a little bit just to enhance a certain part of it, you know, to compensate for whatever is deficient in other areas. But yeah, you know, so ever since I started at Glen Scotia, I tend to do lightly, medium, and heavily peated. Lightly 0 to 10. 0 to 20, or 1% to 20, I should say.
Are we talking ppm here?
Yes, parts per million. Yeah, absolutely, Andy. Medium peated goes from 20 to 30 ppm, parts per million, and heavily peated goes beyond that. And in fact, the only heavily peated I've ever done at Glen Scotia, before my time, the highest ppm was about 38-ish. I've done about a 55 ppm. When first impressions, you think, okay, right, that's incredibly peaty, and it's obviously really going to, have a huge influence. It's like an Islay whiskey. Not necessarily so. It's how you obviously treat that obviously the malted barley through the process, how you the fermentations, everything but right back to the grinding, the mashing, the fermentation, and importantly the distillation. How we get a balance in there. So can I answer the question there? I've did some first fill bourbons. In fact, I've done them back in 2013. They were heavily peated. Simplicity itself. And it was wonderful, absolutely wonderful dram. It was light, it was dried hay, it was a grassiness, it was sweet. The peat never dominated in there. You never get much peat in the nose, but when you tasted it, wonderful. Strong, that's 62%. So a couple of drams, you think, whoa, right, okay.
Yeah, that does sound absolutely lovely, I have to be honest. I'm just going to read a couple more of these tasting notes. Ali C almost has the nose of a butter-washed rye old-fashioned, but backed by a hint of smoke and salt. Ian Thompson has to go, but he's enjoyed both, and Glen Scotia is his winner for tonight. Already beaten us there. Ian has to let us know before he goes which one is his winner from tonight. But remember, we're going to ask you for your winner from the box, not just from tonight's tasting session. Joe F, it took me until the end of the dram with some water to really appreciate the Glen Scotia. The apples, oranges, raisins and spice on the palate really make for a wonderful dram. Joe F, the long fruity finish with gentle spicy warmth is really, really nice. WTC Calder with another question is saying the 18 is delicious, but little birdie tells me you have a cracking release coming for Christmas. Any clues?
Yeah, well, if I tell you, they'll shoot me. That's the only problem here. I really don't want to be shot. So yes, it's well, I can tell you. I'll tell you. Obviously, I can't really talk about that because there's quite a lot hinging in the seasonal release, if you like. But yeah, absolutely, it'll be wonderful. It's obviously got a wonderful use of casks. What we were talking about earlier, which is it'll be a cracking dram. It'll really be interesting. And again, kind of pushing the boundaries a wee bit.
Okay. I love that pushing, so I'm already getting excited by this one. And funnily enough, too, there'll be a shop release coming out, which is a single cask, and that is actually an old favourite of mine. It's one I've been using in the Dunnage tastings. It's a tawny port finish. You're talking about the port cask there. That's a wonderful dram, absolutely wonderful drams. It's beautiful, rich. Wow. Glen Scotia, Campbelltown. Campbelltown and Port, yeah. James Fallon, 2 drops of H2O and boom. I'm putting boom in capital letters there. Rob Best enjoying the spice coming out the end, like black pepper seasoning on top. Nigel Gain, easy choice for me tonight, the Glen Scotia. Everyone's already second guessing that we're going to ask this question. Colin Barker, this is lovely. This is a real subtlety to this dram. Doesn't shout like the Kavalan. Reveals its complexity slowly. Can't get enough of it. I feel a bottle purchase coming on. Remember, if you do like them, they will be in the Pour and Sip store for you guys with your members discount. Mike Pizarro, Glen Scotia by far the best this month. Must add to the collection. You guys know the drill because you're already kind of beating. Well, I've not even asked you yet, but thank you. And we will be asking. So yeah, I can see that this one is going down really good. Well, anyway, thank you so much for talking to us, Ian. I've got one question more for you. What would be your desert island dram?
Oh my goodness. You know how to put me in the spot. Do you know that's I think I'll need to take a few different distilleries because
I'll let you have 2.
Well, my goodness. Well, I would certainly I'd probably take 2 drams from Campbelltown. I'd probably take a Glen Scotia and I'd probably take a Springbank. So I'd probably take something like a refill sherry hogshead from Springbank, and I would probably from Glen Scotia, I would probably take something that's simplistic, as a first fill bourbon, potentially with a little bit of peat in it there. So, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, thank you very much for talking to us. I will invite Christy back, and she can let us know. How did you find the dram, Christy?
I am loving it. Honestly, the complexity. I have to admit, I did sneak ahead and had a little taste while you were talking, so I just couldn't resist. No sense of self-control.
I don't think you were the only one, Christy. I have to be honest.
It just noses so beautifully. I need to get stuck in. But also, Iain, I feel like I have let the side down here because I should have opened by saying congratulations to you on the team, because the 25-year-old was voted the very best whiskey in the world earlier this year, which is absolutely amazing and a phenomenal achievement.
You know, and that's, you know, what I was talking about earlier there. Absolutely, you know, it really is. It's you know, it's quite remarkable, you know, the journey the distillery's been on and how it's developed, and a wonderful team. But I've got to say, you know, it's in no small part to the wonderful whiskey fraternity. You know, that everyone that loves whiskey is you know, has obviously contributed to that. So yeah, it's incredibly humbling. I've got to say, it really is. It's wonderful. Yeah, and whiskey's an incredible industry to be in. It really is. Thank you.
It's amazing. I'm going to also, while you're here, take advantage of your expertise and ask a question that I can't remember who it was asked us earlier in the day about how does the ABV of a whiskey kind of affect how loudly it might shout? Is it always the case that the higher ABV ones will have more to say, or could you get like a louder whiskey at 40%? Like, how does that work when you're blending stuff?
Well,
stuff even.
Yeah, I mean, it's ABV. You know, it's obviously when you consider a whiskey. You know, so if you consider a whiskey even in a cask or a bottle, you know, sometimes you've got to get beyond the ABV is the best way of describing it or looking at it. You know, that single cask peated whiskey that I talked about, Glen Scotia is quite accessible at a high ABV, so that works quite well with me. But it's when you drink it, obviously, it is quite strong. So absolutely, whiskies like that, if you really want to appreciate them, you know, at a higher ABV, then it's always good practice to slightly dilute them down a bit, and you'll probably be able to appreciate them slightly easier. The flavour profile, absolutely, you initially try them, you know, give them a try at that high ABV, but then dilute them down. You know, do it quite scientifically if you want, look at it, and you'll obviously appreciate it a lot better. So ABV, yeah, it's something that sometimes puts a lot of people off. You know, it really does. You know, the strength can be quite daunting at times, I've got to say. But yeah, I'm up there in the high range. You know, I'm always.
I'm vegetarian. I'm absolutely with you there. Cask strength for me is definitely tickles my fancy. Just before we wrap up, and whilst you already are, I think everyone knows the drill, Christy. They know what's coming.
They know. They're on it.
Do let us know which your favourite from the box was, not just for tonight. From the box was. And we will kind of wrap up and see which ones you guys like the most. Already, people, I'm getting a kind of theme here. Nigel Gaines saying, in fact, I think the Glen Scotia is the best of the box. Green Tea is Green saying seconded. Malcolm Tucker's asking if he can pre-order the Tawny Port at Christmas now. David Stanton is saying that Glen Scotia is the best this month, just bought himself a bottle. El Sutton, love them both tonight, but the Glen Scotia is in a class of its own. Rob Bester, for me, it's the Bowmore. I'm a sucker for the smoke, but this Glen Scotia is very enjoyable, close second. Eddie Marshall, Glen Scotia is my absolute favourite this month. They can do no wrong for me. Alistair Tapp, Glen Scotia from the fort. I'll exclude Kavalan because I'm a fanatic and have too many Kavalans.
No such thing as too many Kavalans.
Jim Freeman, Bowmore, then Glen Scotia, but other half prefers the Glen Scotia. Malcolm Tucker tonight, the Glen Scotia. Malcolm Tucker, overall, the Bowmore smoke.
I see. I read that wrong and thought, Malcolm, you can't have two. That's cheating.
Yeah, that's what I thought he was doing as well. Nikolai, close race between the Glen Scotia and Bowmore, but by factor of surprise, the Bowmore wins. Peter Gold, Glen Scotia this evening without a doubt. Joel Phillips, Glen Scotia when it's it for me. Simon, Glen Scotia is still a fave. Daddy Rack is the find of the month. I agree with the Daddy Rack. I loved that. I wasn't expecting. I hadn't really heard of it before. It's a big up, pour and sip, and these boxes. Ian Jambo Rain, the Glen Scotia just pips the John Walker celebratory blend, and the Bowmore for me.
I mean, I feel like, and this isn't just us blowing our own trumpet, but the diversity of the whiskies for this month. We've had, a small batch Tennessee whiskey. We've had the Kavalan, and then we had 3 very different scotches, one of which was a blend. So I feel like if this was your first Pour and Sip box, welcome to the world of whiskey. It's a fantastic place to be. The spectrum of flavour is incredible, and I just feel ridiculously lucky to have found a spirit like this that is just
so
incredible to explore.
That being said, I mean, there's so much going on and so much kind of creativity within the industry. And you were talking, Ian, about the boundary pushing, that you were doing a new experimental kind of release. And where do you, before we wrap up, where do you see the industry going in 5 years? Where are the next kind of big things to come out? Because we're going through this absolute boom at the moment. Where is it going?
Oh, I mean, luckily there's no end to it. It really is. Obviously the year and a half, 2 years we've been through has been obviously devastating for a lot of people. It's been incredibly tough, and whiskey's obviously suffered, but whiskey's that buoyant. Really, it's found ways to compensate. It's found ways to obviously keep us all connected, like tonight. So I think that's the story of whiskey at the moment. I think whiskey can do no wrong at the moment. It's really pushing on. Everybody's in love with it, which is fantastic. And it's not just here. It's not just national. It's not just European. It's globally. It's a global concept, which is wonderful. And I think Christy mentioned this earlier. There's so many distilleries, fantastic distilleries around the world. Whether it's Australia, whether it's Iceland. I was actually watching a video with a group of guys in Iceland on Saturday. That's what I was doing my afternoon, and it was a wonderful distillery. So yeah.
I mean, Iceland is on my travel list ever since I realised that this place in the Eurovision Fire Saga film was real. So now I've got 2 reasons to go and visit the place and the distillery.
Absolutely, and it was wonderful. It seemed a really quaint little place. It was a wee bit quirky, and it's obviously wonderful whiskies. That's what it's all about.
Mad time. I think it shows the resilience of the whiskey industry as well, to go through a period like it's gone through with COVID and everything, and it's almost coming out of it stronger and found new ways to adapt and new ways to kind of, the festivals have still carried on, the shows have essentially still carried on. We've seen online whiskey shows, online whiskey tastings, and it's mad how the industry's adapted. But I think the industries that will survive this are the ones that have adapted really well and have found new ways to connect with their audience and their customers. And I think the whiskey has proved how it can. So it's really impressive.
Yeah. I think that's really important. I think you've really got to connect with your audience or your customers, and I think it's probably a must, really. You owe them that. You certainly do, so yeah.
Awesome stuff.
Well, I have absolutely loved reading all your votes. I think every whiskey in the box has had a vote for being top favourite, which is great to see. Thank you so much for coming to join us, Ian. It's been fantastic. You're an amazing guest, and it's been brilliant to have you on. And thank you, everyone, for sharing your thoughts and your tasting notes. Honestly, it's such a joy to get everyone involved, and it feels just like a real whiskey community, which is the whole point, right, Andy? We love it.
Absolutely. And as comments here say, Simon, how do the boxes keep getting better every month? Ian Jambo Rain, brilliant box. I love this club. Nigel Gain, I must say that all the whiskies are very enjoyable. It's been very educational. Green Tea is Green, extraordinary range this month in particular. Jeremy Anderson saying great tasting, a great guest tonight. Thank you, Pour and Sip.
It's been fabulous. And we will be back for some more live tastings next month. Obviously, we're here the 1st and 3rd Thursday. So in August, that is the 5th and the 19th. Same time, same place, 7:30, always. But you can keep in touch with us, obviously, in between times. The old social media channels at Pour and Sip Club and the Pour and Sip Digest on the blog. Don't forget to check that out with loads more info about the whiskies. And don't forget to redeem your points in the member store. Points mean kind of prizes, I guess. Money off anyway. And we will see you all again soon.
Cool. Cheers, everybody.
Raising a glass. Yes. Cheers, everyone. Have great evenings. Bye.
Guys, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.